Mitch Jackson joining us from Southern California. Hey, Mitch.
Hi,
What's
everybody.
your question for the governor?
Thanks for having me on, Governor Dukakis. It's nice to see you on Spreecast.
Nice to be with all of you and looking forward to my annual winter quarter at UCLA. We'll be out
Well,
there in late December.
I'll tell you what, the weather's beautiful out here, and that's one reason I wanted to come on this morning. My daughter's a freshman at UCLA, and
Really?
she
What's she
sure is.
majoring in?
She's majoring in econ and finance, which is their, I guess, the business major somewhat. And
Well, tell them to come in and see me.
well, I would love to. And she also
Well, I'm in the
was head.
Public Affairs building on the 6th floor. I'll be arriving shortly after the first of the year, and I'd love to see her and talk with her and maybe see if we get her interested in at least minoring in public policy. And if she does
She
that, then she'll have me. So
Well, she
I'd
doesn't
love to
listen
do
to
that.
me. She doesn't listen to me, but I think she'll listen to you. And she headed up the Young Democrats in high school. But here's the thing: she also was an outstanding cross country runner in high school. Had one of the
Wow.
top all time times, and was
Well,
looking.
it was very amusing, speaking of cross country. I ran the Boston Marathon when I was 17. I was a high school senior. And at that time, it was a record field, if you can believe this, Mitch, of 300. There was no running shoe made to run on hard surfaces. I ran that 26-mile race in
Wow.
low-cad sneakers because that's all that was available. And all I can tell you is this. If you run a marathon, you know what your time is. You know what your time is.
Yeah.
Mine happened to be 3:31, which wasn't bad. I mean, I was 57th in 1951. I'd be 5,000th today. But when Ryan kind of forgot his marathon time, a lot of us who are
Yeah.
cross-country runners and occasionally have run a marathon had to chuckle a little bit. I don't
Well,
know whether it was delusional or what, but
last night he seemed to forget quite a few facts, and I thought Joe Biden did an excellent job at steering the conversation back to the facts, back to the issues, and pointing out on the Middle East issues. 49 other countries are working with us to resolve the issues in Syria and Lebanon and the Middle East, and it was just a great debate.
Didn't you love Ryan's dancing around on the stimulus program? He's been the stimulus program's harshest critic, and there he was, like every other Republican congressman, doing everything he could to get money for his district out of the stimulus package because he thought it would create jobs. Can't be more hypocritical than that.
And it came across as being hypocritical. My question this morning is, we've got a law firm here in Southern California, 27 years. I practiced with my wife, and over the last 5 years, we've really enjoyed implementing social media into our practice, into our relationship building efforts. My question to you is, what's your take on the impact of social media today in the presidential election, and had social media been around back in 1988 when you were running for office, would you have run for the presidency of the United States, knowing what we know now about instant video and instant communications? And how would you have used social media to assist you with your presidential campaign?
Well, I don't think it's any question. It's a factor, and if I'd been running at a time when it was out there, we would have certainly used it. On the other hand, I am a huge believer in old-fashioned precinct-based grassroots organizing. Which doesn't mean that the internet and social media and all of these kinds of things are not important. As we've seen, it's an enormous fundraising tool to begin with. I mean, Barack Obama will be setting some records in terms of the millions of relatively small donors who are contributing to his campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But and in terms of being in touch with your organization and on an almost instant basis and mobilizing them. But there is no substitute, Mitch, for what I call precinct-based grassroots organizing, which unfortunately is done very much in California, and I think that's a mistake. What do I mean by that? A precinct captain and 6 block captains in every single precinct, making personal contact on an ongoing basis with every single voting household. And I'm not talking about telephones. I'm talking about knocking on doors, connecting with people personally. President Obama did that in 2008. And if he were here, he'd tell you it was the single most important ingredient in that success. And one of the reasons that he continues to do well in the so-called battleground states, even though he's being carpet bombed with attack ads, is that he's got that field organization out there. So on the one hand, you want to use the social media effectively, and you can, and it can be a great help to you. On the other hand, it is not a substitute for what I would call old-fashioned grassroots campaigning, and I don't think candidates are doing enough of it. I don't think Republicans aren't doing much of it. I'm not sure the Democrats are doing as much as they should. And no exceptions. I'm talking about every precinct, every voting household. I don't care what they're registered as or what their previous voting behavior. If you've done this, as I have, it's amazing what you discover as you go door to door and you meet with people, and not just once, but come back, answer their questions, be responsive to them, makes a huge difference.
Governor, you're a distinguished professor at Northeastern, visiting at UCLA. You do a lot of public policy. I know you're very involved, but do you miss politics? Do you miss campaigning?
Well, you never get out of it. I mean, even though I've been out of elective office since 1991, I'm deeply and actively involved here and across the country. Part of it is my teaching, where I'm trying to inspire young people to go into public life and to become a part of this world of politics and public life. But I'm still very active. I'm deeply involved in Elizabeth Warren's campaign here, which, by the way, is going very well, and very much involved nationally as well. So it's not something you retire from, believe me, if you're interested and you care about these things. And so Kitty and I continue to be very actively and deeply involved. We're out every single weekend, meeting with canvassing groups in every part of the state for Elizabeth, not only giving them pep talks, but going out and knocking on doors with them. And we'll continue to do that right up until Election Day.
I want to talk about the Brown and Warren debate or race in just a second, but what do you say to students who are coming in with such disdain and pessimism? You see Congress divided, gridlock, all these things happening in politics. What do you say to students who are just, turned off?
Well, most of my students are not turned off. Now, I suppose if they take my courses, you've got to assume they have some interest in this, but I've got wonderful students here at Northeastern and at UCLA. Jon Mitchell, my co-teacher on the undergraduate stuff. I teach both an undergraduate and graduate course at UCLA. Excuse me, but Jon Mitchell and I have been co-teaching this California Policy Issues course now for the past 16 years. We have approximately 60 students. We spent a lot of time with them. And these are kids who want to go into public service. That's why they're there, and they're terrific. And not only that, but they're a remarkably diverse group of young people. About 2/3 of our class were first or second generation Americans this past year. And that's been typical. And they come from every ethnic and racial group. Their parents come from all over the world, and these kids are terrific. And in 20 years, they're going to be running the state of California. So they're a constant inspiration as far as I'm concerned. And I think one of the things a guy like me can do is to not only encourage them, and try to help them develop the skills they need to be effective in public life, but to open up doors for them so that they can get some experience. Here at Northeastern, as you may know, we're one of the great co-op universities. Our kids go 5 years, not 4. And after the first year, which is all academic, they start rotating. 6 months work, 6 months study, 6 months work, 6 months study. And these are paid jobs. They're not just unpaid internships. So that, for example, the average political science major here will have 3 or 4 different professional experiences before he or she graduates. And in most cases, they walk right into jobs with their co-op employers. So a guy in my position who's had the kind of experience I've had can really help them to identify those kinds of jobs that would be good for them. And at UCLA, although they don't have what we have here, they do have something called the UCDC internship program, where you can do a quarter in Washington with some coursework, but with a real serious internship. And I have lots and lots of my students at UCLA who are encouraged to go into the program, do go into it, have the experience of working in the White House or on Capitol Hill, and those are life-transforming experiences. These kids, I mean, almost without exception, once they've done that internship, they're hooked. So it's an exciting thing and really very inspiring to me to see this new generation of young people in this country who want to do public work. Believe me, they're a hell of a lot better than my generation in terms of their interest in public service and their desire to do it.
Very inspirational. Mitch, what's your question?
Well, it's right along the same lines of what Governor Dukakis was just talking about. My question is, do you have any words of advice that you can share with us for college students like my daughter who think they may want to get into politics? Any pearls of wisdom about what to expect, the best way to go about it, with all of the negative campaigning out there from both sides? What should they expect? What should they be prepared for? Or from a family standpoint, how is this going to affect their short-term family lives and their long-term family lives? And what can they do to prepare?
Well, I told them about my own experience to start with. When Kitty and I were courting and decided we were going to be married, I was already in the legislature. And so one of the big questions was, how are we going to deal with our family life and our personal life? And we essentially adopted two rules. One, no politics on Sunday. Sundays would be family.
Okay.
Sunday would be family day. And secondly, I would be home for dinner every night at 6 o'clock. I might go out after dinner, but that 6 to 7:15, 7:30 hour was mine and my family's. Now, we were fortunate. This is a relatively small state. We live about 10 or 15 minutes from the State House in the first suburb just west of Boston. So I was able to do that, but I was almost a fanatic about this, with three exceptions: the St. Patrick's Day Parade in South Boston, Greek Independence Day, and Combined Jewish Philanthropy Super Sunday. Sundays were precious, and on those 3 days, I was home with my family on Saturday. And secondly, the dinner hour was just sacrosanct. Now, look, you're a busy lawyer. We've got lots of people running around, working hard in their professional lives. We all have these issues, don't we, in terms of family and professional demands and all of that kind of stuff. Trust me, you can be a very, very effective public servant. You can even be governor 3 times and still stick with those rules. Now, that's a little more difficult if you're running for the presidency of the United States and you're in Seattle and you can't get home at 6 o'clock at night. So obviously you've got to make some compromises there. But even in that case, I can honestly tell you, and this is no reflection on the Clintons or the Gores or the Obamas or anyone else who is in the White House, had just one of my children still been in high school, I would have never run for the presidency. I would have never run for the presidency.
I was going to ask if you would have done it all over again if you had a chance. Would you do
all
it
over
again?
But I would not run for national office if one of my children was still in school at home. And I just felt very strongly about that. I mean, there's nothing more important to me than my family. And fortunately, despite decades in public life, we've got 3 great kids. And they have 3 wonderful spouses. We've got 8 grandkids. We're going to be celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary next year, and we're going to be taking them all to Greece for a week or 10 days. But I think it is just so important to make sure that you've got some rules that guarantee that you're going to be spending quality time with your family. And I tell this to my students, that there's no reason why they have to sacrifice a rich personal and family life when they go into politics or go into public service. I tell them that they better plan to live moderately, that if they want to make a lot of money, don't go into public service. There are enormous satisfactions in being in public service. Needless to say, I mean, the ability to make a difference in the lives of your fellow citizens is a very precious opportunity. And I've never regretted it for a minute, but you're not going to make a lot of money. You can live moderately and well, but don't expect to be rich and be in public service. And the third thing I say to them, Mitch, is there is nothing inherently corrupting about public service. That's a lot of nonsense. You set high standards of integrity for yourself and the people that work for you. You'll be fine. And so one of the things I try to teach is, okay, how do you set those high standards? How do you maintain them? How do you make sure that the people who work for you maintain them? And every once in a while, there'll be somebody who does something crazy or stupid or unethical, even though you try to set those very high standards for yourself and the people that work for you. But there are people in the state that like me, people in the state that don't like me. I don't think there's anyone that won't tell you that Dukakis was a guy that really cared deeply about integrity for himself and his administrations and worked hard at it. So those are the kinds of lessons, bromides, call them what you will, that I try to convey to my students, and I'd like to think for the most part they're absorbing them. And I will tell you that I've got literally hundreds and hundreds of former students who are now working in public life all over the country, and I'm very proud of them.
Governor, we have Valley Swerdlow. She now lives in Virginia, and she says, we lived in Andover, Massachusetts when you were in office and thought you were terrific.
Well, I'm grateful for that. I hope so. I must say, there's no better job than being governor of Massachusetts. I mean, this is an incredible state with loads of talented people who care very deeply about the state and about their community and their country, and there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it, and I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of the 12 years that I was governor. Unfortunately, I would have enjoyed maybe not quite as much being in the White House. I mean, one of the things that she probably remembers is that I refuse to have security as governor. We don't have a governor's mansion in this state. If we had one, I wouldn't have lived in it. We lived in our own home, in our own neighborhood. Kids went to the local schools, and I took the streetcar to work. And it wasn't an act. I've been taking it since I was 5. But the opportunity to be the chief executive of a state like this and to get the kind of support that one gets from good people all over the state, it's really extraordinary, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I wish I'd had an opportunity to at least try to bring some of that to the White House. Unfortunately, I kind of blew that election, but and I'm still deeply and actively involved here in the Commonwealth.
My screen is frozen. Are you there, Governor?
I can't see you, but I hear you.
I've got a follow-up question while Esther's maybe refreshing her screen.
I'm back.
There she is. Okay.
I'm back. I have a question from Sam Krishna real quick. What's the biggest offensive and defensive attacks missing from the Obama campaign, and what will Romney have to do to defeat the president?
I don't think anything's missing from the president's campaign. I think on the whole it's been a very good campaign. He obviously didn't do as well as he had wanted to do, and a lot of us hoped he would do in the first debate, but I don't think that's going to defeat him. I mean, some of us remember the first Mondale-Reagan debate where President Reagan was an absolute disaster. I mean, confused, muddled, old. People were wondering what was with this guy, and almost overnight the race, which at least in the polls had shown a comfortable lead for a really comfortable lead for President Reagan, became a tied race. Well, we all know what happened. He had an opportunity to spend some time thinking about it, and did quite well in the second debate, and won the election overwhelmingly. I think that's essentially what we'll see. But in terms of the campaign itself, I think it's been an extremely well-executed campaign. I think the president himself has been an excellent campaigner. Just remember this. I don't care who you are, what's your party, what's your political philosophy. If you're the chief executive when the economy is still soft, you're going to have problems. Now, I think, frankly, that Obama and Biden have done a remarkable job bringing this country back. I mean, one of the things that we didn't hear yesterday was just how much like the Bush economic and foreign policies, the Romney-Ryan economic foreign policies are. I mean, who was it? Bill Clinton, who said these guys want to go back and do what got us into this mess in the first place, only on steroids. The That's the truth. I mean, it's just Bush v. Ducks. And in point of fact, as Joe pointed out, Ryan voted for all of that stuff. He voted for the wars. He voted for these massive tax cuts for the rich. He voted against regulating financial institutions and all of the kinds of safeguards you have to have if you're going to make sure that your financial world is solid and stable. And now they want to go back and do it all over again. And, I mean, you know, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's essentially what we're getting from these guys. So I think the president and all of us who are working hard for him have simply got to remind people that but for this administration, I think we would have gone into another Great Depression. If John McCain had been elected president of the United States and Sarah Palin had been the vice president, I have no doubt that we would now be struggling through something close to, if not equal to, the Great Depression. No doubt about it.
I've always felt the same way.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Esther. Well, I was just going to ask the governor what the Next Generation initiative is and why is it so dear to your heart?
Say again.
The Next Generation initiative, I understand that's a program that you're involved with, I believe. Could you share
the Next Generation? Well, it's actually something that came out of the Greek community. And it's been an effort on the part of a lot of us to try to reach out to young Greek Americans and get them deeply and actively involved in public life and serve as mentors for them. You know, all of us Greeks are very proud of our ethnic heritage. I don't have to tell you, notwithstanding Greece's problems these days. And there are very close ties within the community. And there's nothing I love better than to meet and talk, work with, and mentor a young Greek American coming from the same background I came from, and try to get that young person actively involved in public life. After all, as we're taught from the time we are old enough to understand anything, whether it's in Greek or in English, that Athens was the birthplace of democracy, and we have this very proud heritage, which we are in fact very proud of. But it's not enough just to kind of read history books. I mean, I tell these young Greek Americans, hey, you've got a responsibility, a special responsibility, given who you are and where you come from, to get deeply involved in the politics and public life of this country, and many of them to respond. So we're working hard to try to excite these kids, get them involved, and make sure they understand how important public service is.
Governor, I want to ask you about Elizabeth Warren and Scott Brown in the race, and you've been helping Elizabeth Warren. How do you think that race is going?
Well, it's going well. She's a remarkable person. I didn't know Elizabeth except by reputation before this campaign, and obviously in the course of the campaign I've got to know her. And she just gets better and better and stronger, and not surprisingly, Brown is now running attack ads against her, which are not only outrageous in many respects and very unfair, but I think reflect the fact that he knows he's in trouble. And she had a bit of a slow start, but she's coming on very strong, and unlike the guy you're looking at, she understands that when people start attacking you, you better be ready with a response immediately, and she is. She also has a superior field organization. I'll take a little bit of credit for that because, as you can tell, I have pushed it very hard. And her field operation is much better than Brown's, if he has one at all. So my hope and expectation is that in these last weeks now, these thousands of people that are out canvassing for her will just redouble their efforts. If they do that and do it well, she's going to win.
Governor, are you still running? Governor, are you still running?
I'm walking these days. Not that I'm getting old and decrepit. You know, I'm going to be 79 in a month.
You look amazing.
And, I feel 30.
You do. I don't believe
you look
that.
amazing.
You got to watch it a little bit with his running stuff. So I moved to power walking about 15 years ago, and I walk swinging light weights, which frankly gives you all all the exercise and certainly all the cardiovascular benefits that you can get from running without damaging your legs and having to go in for knee replacements and that kind of stuff. And it's approximately 2 miles from our front door to Northeastern University. So it's 2 miles over in the morning, 2 miles back at night, and you do 4 miles a day of brisk walking, you're going to be okay. And I do a lot of stretching and that kind of stuff just to make sure I'm staying in shape. So I feel terrific and really feel half my age. And I think, too, that the teaching, Mitch, does a lot for you. I mean, as I said to you, these kids are just constant inspirations, and you can't start feeling old when you're surrounded by young Americans these days, and especially young Americans who are deeply interested in politics and public service, and they're a wonderfully energizing force. So I'm not a runner, but I'm a brisk walker and a power walker, and if you're in Westwood in the wintertime, or even down on Ocean Boulevard, don't be surprised if you see the Dukakises walking briskly along and not only enjoying what is a wonderful Southern California winter, but doing so and getting their exercise at the same time. And we've got a little condo on Kelton Avenue, which is about a 25-minute walk from my office in the North Campus. And so I do that every day, about 1.5 miles up and 1.5 miles back. So you do that kind of thing, and you're going to be in pretty good shape.
Governor, my sister Bernadette says November 3rd is your birthday. Happy birthday. And she says, hello, Governor. So wonderful to hear and see you doing well. I'm a former City Year Court member, former aide to Congressman Marty Meehan, and now left politics life, but I haven't left my service life. I now work as a model in New York City and started a nonprofit charity with girls and women who need to be continued support in education and social matters. What women in public office do you think are movers and shakers today? That's my sister Bernadette.
And she's in New York these days and worked for Marty Meehan.
She worked for Marty. Bernadette, I can't remember when it was, but it was in the late 90s, I believe, when he was still in a Congress. So
right.
She was with him. Bernadette.
Now doing a great job. Now, by the way, doing a great job as chancellor at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell. I mean, he is just terrific. I've known Marty for a long time. He was out in Iowa campaigning for me back in 1988. Just a terrific guy, great person, a great public servant. My advice to young women is that the sky's the limit in terms of what you can do. And don't let anybody tell you you can't do it, including being president of the United States, because we're going to have a woman president of the United States one of these days, and it's going to be sooner rather than later. It took us a while to get there. I mean, when I first got into politics, women in elective office were relatively rare, but that's gone. And the Brown-Warren campaign is an example of this. I mean, I can't say enough for Elizabeth and who she is and what she is and how she's conducted herself as a candidate in this campaign. You know, these statewide campaigns are tough. And this is not an easy place. This is a very lively political environment around here. So I think, you know, those of us who were born and brought up in Massachusetts are infected from birth with two things, politics and the Red Sox. And we really have both diseases. But I think these days that the sky's the limit, and I speak as a Greek American who, quite frankly, when I was elected to the legislature in 1962, it was inconceivable that a Greek American could become governor of Massachusetts. Not because people didn't like us, but it just wasn't in the ethnic politics of the time. 20 years later, we had a Greek in the governor's office. That was me. We had a Greek in the United States Senate. That was Paul Tsongas. We had a Greek in Congress, a fellow named Nick Mavroulis, all from Massachusetts. All of us, by the way, sons of immigrants. And that just gives you some sense of how far we came at that point. Now we have an African-American president of the United States and an African-American governor of Massachusetts. And those two things would have been beyond inconceivable back when I started in public life. So whoever you are out there, male or female, whatever your background, the color of your skin, um, this country is a country that offers opportunity and a real opportunity to lead in public life. And I hope every single person, young person in this country understands this. I mean, who was I, for heaven's sake? You know, a Greek kid with a funny name in a community that maybe had 40 Greek families out of 60,000 people, and I was elected to represent my community in the state legislature, elected governor 3 times, at least nominated for the presidency of the United States. That isn't a life story that proves what I'm saying. I don't know what is. So, and the president's life story itself is just extraordinary. So, so to young women in particular, get involved, get into this business, and there's no limit to what you can do.
Thank you, Governor.
Governor, we're just so you know, we're from Hungary, and we have a little niece that was born in the United States, and we hope one day she'll become president.
Why not? No. Incidentally, this is probably something you don't know, but Kitty's real grandmother was Hungarian.
Wow.
And in point of fact, in April, we took 2 weeks to go to Europe and explore Kitty's mother's roots. Her mother had a life story which you couldn't even make up. She was born out of wedlock in New York City in 1913 to a Hungarian Jewish woman and an Irishman. She never knew her biological father, although his twin sister, who by the way was named Kitty, was the best friend of Margaret Buxbaum, her real mother. She was adopted at birth by a childless Jewish couple who didn't bother to tell her for 8 years that her nanny was her real mother. You can believe this. And then shipped her off to live with a family outside of Paris, about 10 miles outside of Paris, from the time she was 9 to 13, to a progressive German school outside of Frankfurt from 13 to 16, to school in Berlin where she trained as a nurse social worker, and then worked in what in those days we called an institution for the retarded at Spandau, of all places, outside of Berlin, where she met this young violinist from Somerville, Massachusetts, Kitty's dad, who subsequently became a member of the Boston Symphony Orchestra and associate conductor of the Boston Pops. And we went back to Hungary, to Germany, and to France for a couple of weeks this past April. Spent 5 days in Hungary, lived at the residence of the American ambassador, who happens to be a Greek-American from Sacramento, California, Eleni Tsakopoulos, and her husband and kids. Thanks to her and her staff, they found Margaret's birthplace, all kinds of family history. We then visited the school that Kitty's mother went to outside of Frankfurt. 6 of the faculty members waiting for us on Easter Saturday with a file this thick of papers and correspondence and records about my mother-in-law, and then to the neighborhood outside of Paris where she spent these 4 years. I mean, it's an incredible story. But had a wonderful time in Budapest, learned all kinds of things about Kitty's grandmother's family and her history itself. And it wasn't until Kitty was 17 that she actually knew that this woman who she knew and loved as Aunt Margaret was her real grandmother. I mean, it's you couldn't make this up. You know? There's a novel there someplace. But so Kitty's got good Hungarian blood in her. I want you to know that.
Bernadette, what's your question?
I don't have one.
Okay, go ahead, Mitch.
Excuse me. I just wanted to follow up on what the governor said about teaching courses, being around students, keeping you young, keeping you enthusiastic. In our Rotary Club, Governor, each month we honor 2 high school students from a local high school who have achieved some type of either academic excellence, community service excellence, just amazing kids. And at the end of the year, when I see these just wonderful students and their families and their parents, because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. There's usually a correlation there. I know our country's going to be okay. And our daughter, who hopefully you're going to be meeting real soon when you come back out to UCLA, she was the Rotary Interact District Governor for Orange County. She oversaw her senior year 40 Interact clubs in 40 different high schools. So when these kids would get together for the district conferences, it made me proud as an American that our country's going to be just fine. They don't make the news. They're not doing all these silly things that make the news and sell newspapers, but they're quality people with good heads on their shoulders. And I think these will be the future politicians of our country. And that's why I asked you earlier if you had any advice for specifically, some of her friends, including her. I'm going to share the Spreecast with them. I'm going to share the link and let them watch it, and hopefully they'll follow your words of advice. But I think our country's in good shape, and I think our youth are just amazing individuals. Have you seen that also in your classrooms?
Yeah, I don't know why we don't hear more about this. I wish the press would cover these kids more. There's nothing more depressing than watching local television news in Los Angeles, unless it's in Miami, which is worse. I mean, it's 7 crime stories in the weather and sports day after day after day. And I think the press owes us more than that. Why aren't they covering these kids? Why aren't they giving people a sense of what's going on? I mean, all of this talk about how the schools are going to hell in a handbasket and so forth. Look, when Kitty and I got out of high school, the high school dropout rate in the United States was over 50%. Over 50% of the kids in this country never finished high school.
Really?
All of this nostalgia for a time when the schools were great and everybody behaved, nobody got pregnant, and all this kind of stuff. I don't know where it comes from. But these kids are wonderful. I mean, they're miles ahead of my generation in terms of where they are, what they want to do, their commitment to the community. If I had my druthers, Mitch, every high school kid in this country would take a civics course or a problems of democracy course or whatever we ought to call it, and do an internship as a junior or a senior with a local office holder on a part-time basis as part of the regular school curriculum. Believe me, if we did that, you'd see even more of these young people wanting to go into public service. And I don't know why we don't do it. I mean, it would be easy, it would be wonderfully educational, no matter what these kids decided to do. I talk to doctors all the time these days. I mean, I'm deeply involved in this health policy stuff. By the way, another enormous difference between the candidates. Apparently Mitt Romney, despite what he did here, doesn't think that working Americans with their families ought to have decent, affordable health care, and the overwhelming majority of people without insurance in this country are working, and members of their families. They're not loafing, they're not sitting around, they're working. Some of them 2 or 3 jobs, no health insurance. But I say to doctors these days, young doctors, and I speak to many of them, excuse me, I say to them, look, if you're going to be a doctor, you can't afford to be non-political. Sorry, but your life is going to be bound up in public policy and what those of us in elected office do or try to do to improve the healthcare system and expand insurance coverage and good health care to all Americans. And so it doesn't make a difference what your profession is. An internship in your last year or 2 in high school with an elected or appointed official for that matter. I don't care whether you're working for the city manager or the commissioner of public works or a legislator or a city councilor. I just think that kind of experience for every single young American would pay enormous dividends.
Yeah, community service is what it's all about.
Governor, I'll tell you what, I'll give you my word. I'm going to host a Spreecast in the future with some of your students on to talk about public policy. You've inspired me.
We'll be out in early January, and if you want some of these kids to come on and tell you what they're doing and what kinds of experiences they've had doing these internships, I'd be more than happy to encourage them to do so.
That'd be great, Governor.
They're
great idea.
Any final
words? Go ahead.
Any final words, any questions from our Spreecasters? If not, Governor, it's been so great. It's been quite an honor to have you. As you know, I'm a Northeastern alumna, did my master's there in history, and I did quietly sit in to some of your classes, even though I wasn't registered, but I did sit in. You've been quite an inspiration for me. So thank you for all you do.
Great. We'll be in touch after we get out there.
Thank you, Mitch, and thank you, Spreecasters.